Atlantis by Emma James. A long time ago, wizard kind was persecuted by muggles and had to live remotely, in jungles, on mountains, on the ice, or on islands. There was only one wizard school at this time. It was stood in the middle of the ocean, high up atop an island, risen from the ocean and called Atlantis. The grounds were of the most beautiful greenery ever seen. Here the school was protected far away from muggles, to whose eyes the area looked like an active volcano, a deterrent for miles around. Wizarding children would side apparate with their parents to a safe pickup point and fly to the school in carriages pulled by alicorns, who grazed on the luscious, magical, bright green grass that enveloped the school. Wands were, at the time, very unpredictable, and made with reeds from a river that ran through the school. There came a time when the head teacher had the idea to make wands stronger by using better materials. This would contain the magic better, and spells would be much easier. This would mean more children in classrooms and less in the hospital ward. It would also mean the possibility of getting spell restriction for minors lifted at the Department of Magical Law Enforcement on spells that currently only adults could practice, meaning that students could get a much better education. The head teacher, Mr. Keith, thought long and hard. In his youth, he had made many things using magic, and had a variety of magical items he had invented, such as saltwater winemaker, his beard tamer, and his self-painting sketchbrush. The material for the wands had to be strong, but could not be too difficult to get at, as there would be a large demand. He decided that wood was the best option. It was also a flexible material, which would bend the magic appropriately, but not disastrously. The trees in the school grounds were all the homes of bowtruckles, who were friendly creatures with the staff and the students, and at this time were native to the island. Mr. Keith thought that they would be very nice if he were to take a few small branches for examination. So he walked to one of the nearest cluster of trees and cast Diffindo Multipla. 5 large branches fell to the floor. Immediately, the bowtruckles gathered in a circle around the head teacher, standing upon each other to make a wall. As they charged towards him, he fought his way free and ran to the castle. The bowtruckles were not strong enough or big enough to harm such a powerful wizard. The bowtruckles quietly crept down to the riverside to see the alicorns. A plan was agreed. Something needed to be done. Mr. Keith had taken the branches to his office and was busy working on the new wands. However, when he asked the alicorns for hairs for cause, they refused, and retracted their hair, as was their ability to protect its magic. He decided to come back when he had tested the finished item, as of course, alicorn hairs were precious. In the school, the head searched the potion storeroom for items he might use for testing. The bowtruckles arrived and warned him not to come back to harm their trees anymore. He didn't understand, as he thought he had not harmed the trees at all. He finished up his wand, gave them out to the 5th, 6th and 7th year students and watched all week as they progressed rapidly. He even tried 3 restricted spells with them. They were working very well. Mr. Keith walked back towards the trees and severed more branches. It was time for the bowtruckles and alicorns to take action. That night, the bowtruckles crept into the school and took all of the new wands. They replaced them with porcupine quills. Porcupines are actually very magical animals, and this is why they protect themselves from predators. On the mainland, those are muggles. Meanwhile, the alicorns flew into the night. In the morning, the students and teachers woke to find the island's magical creatures surrounding the castle, and around the island, a flock of thunderbirds. Mr. Keith tried to find out what this gathering was about. Were the animals having a social event? No, it seems they were angry and causing a stir. There was a drumming noise building up from the ground. The alicorn leader spoke about treachery, and as the bowtruckles climbed onto the alicorns, the thunderbirds got to work creating a storm like none ever seen that was to topple the island and the school into the sea. All bowtruckles now live on the mainland, and there are many magical schools. The loss to wizard kind was great that day. All schools are on the mainland and protected. Relations with muggles have gradually become more amenable. Wand makers, of course, now use wood and from the special trees bowtruckles live in, but they are clever and learned from that day. The loss of their sacred trees was devastating to the small creatures. That is why now a branch of bowtruckles will always be loyal to one tree. Thunderbirds, bowtruckles, and alicorns have earned a great respect and protection from wizards and witches. Atlantia was so far away from muggles that they didn't notice its disappearance. Muggles are funny like that. But rumours spread and legends became known of something called Atlantis, which sounded so grand it became the talk of muggles as a lost city. Harry Potter Lives at Godric's Hollow by Emma James. On a bright summer morning, Harry walked out the front door and into the street. His friend Theodore was waiting for him. They carried on walking together, past the pub, houses and shops, towards a field behind just outside the village. Over a gate they went and straight into a ditch. They looked out into the fields with a smile on their faces only small boys get when they know they shouldn't be doing something, then sat down in the muddy, wet ditch and started. The stick game was a good one. They found sticks and stones, then ground at the bark until the brown was all peeled off, showing the green underneath. Sometimes they were naughty and broke new sticks, but mostly they looked for new fallen dead sticks. It was easy to tell which one was which because newly fallen sticks were more bendy and heavy than old ones. Next, the great plant discovery was to be done. This one is gillyweed. This one is knotgrass. This one is venomous tentacula. Mimble is Mimbletonia. They were looking at normal muggleweeds, but were enjoying themselves pretending. I can't wait to get to Hogwarts, said Theodore. You'll have a long wait, said Harry. We're only 6. After a couple of hours getting dirty, chatting and messing about with random games in the muddy water, they decided to walk into the field. The 2 boys played hide and seek in the long grass, pretending to hide from an angry farmer. As they sat covered in mess, Harry's magic began to bloom. He made some pebbles levitate. Theodore, whose magic came out a few weeks earlier, had the pebbles spinning in a circle. They watched this for a while, then suddenly the pebbles flew upwards, danced a little, and carefully brought themselves back down again to rest in equal number on Harry and Theodore's hands. The boys were astounded, and asked each other which one of them made it happen, but neither could say. They argued for a while, pointing out that they were alone and one of them must have done it. Then Theodore ran off and Harry followed. At the edge of the field, Theodore fell forwards. He hurt his leg. When they looked, it was bleeding, and Harry saw a broken brick with a very sharp edge pointing up like a shard that had pierced Theodore's leg. Harry took off his top to wrap round the leg loosely, but couldn't do it very tight. With Theodore holding it on loosely, Harry helped him hobble home. When they got there, their parents were in the garden having tea. Mum, Dad, Teddy fell over and hurt himself. The leg was mended easily with a wave of a wand. Lily and James invited Theodore and his parents for dinner. The boys went up to Harry's room to play indoor games. They said sorry to each other for arguing and had a sleepover after dinner. When all was quiet and they were drifting off to sleep, their teddies got up to have a picnic with a tea set. They knew then that there was something special about their magic. What nobody would know until they started school was that these 2 best friends, unique though their innocent love for each other, shared a very unique magical bond that strengthened their combined magic and would tell an epic yet horrific story in the future. Neville's Love Story by Emma James. In the dark, musty, quiet library one late, rainy afternoon, Neville was reading herbology books, while feeling rather pleased about his recent plant experiment. Missing the outdoors, he walked over to the window. Here he watched the owls play with fairies in flight. The breeze in the grass and the sunlight danced through the leaves. The grounds were beautiful as always. Creatures frolicked along the grass or peeped from the forest edge. Suddenly, a voice from behind him said, I love watching the trees. They talk to each other, you know, and have so many intricacies in their design. They're beautiful. Neville turned to behold a girl he thought was quite pretty. She continued to tell him that because trees are so naturally beautiful, that when she looks at them she is reminded that beauty is not just an appearance. It is something that is deeply built into the human soul, and that all people are beautiful somewhere inside if you take the time to see it by making a connection, and that by showing kindness and love, you can make that beauty appear to everyone else. This is, she continued, with the exception of those few who are truly evil. Those people can never know love, friendship, happiness, or care. As she spoke, Neville wondered at the wisdom of this girl and noticed that she was a Ravenclaw student. He told her that was a very wise thing to say. On hearing this, she smiled the sweetest smile, which made Neville quietly smile to himself, hiding it from her. He did not want her to know that he wanted her. He asked her name, which she told him was Bronwyn. They talked more about their shared love of nature, while he likes the magical properties of plants and how they make potions and help people. She likes animals and how they interact with each other and has an inspiring view of the communication system between trees and plants. There is a network of fungus, she explained, between all trees and plants in the world, which carries messages as fast as an owl so that they can talk to each other. The sounds are difficult to hear. You have to really listen, but I am getting really in tune with them. Neville listened as she talked about listening to the trees and trying to work out their language. He told her she needs to write it down and show it to people, which she thought was an amazing idea. It was dinner time, and so Neville asked Bronwyn if she would like to join him. They went down to the hall after packing up the books and ate together. While Neville talked about his experiments to make new plants for use with healing mental illnesses using musical qualities, and his playful plants he was creating as a game for children, he talked informatively about the facts he had learned about the world of plants. Bronwyn was fascinated that he knew so much and adored his creativity. As they left for their dorms, Neville asked Bronwyn to accompany him to the lake on Saturday, and she agreed. On Saturday morning, Neville was very excited at breakfast. He even remembered to bring a herbology book down that Ginny wanted to borrow. The Gryffindor table was very impressed at this. Seamus and Dean jibed him with banter. Ron asked what had come over him. He suggested liquid luck had been spilled into his nightcap. Neville ate his breakfast quickly, then walked down to the lake. When Bronwyn arrived, he pretended to be busy reading a herbology book. But she sat down, and he slowly lowered it and peeked over with a brimming smile to ask how she was. Great, she said, but the baby demigeese have not developed their shimmer yet. My pet Phoenix's fire has waned, and Hagrid says the Thestrals won't learn to pull the carriages. I haven't had time to start on my project with the trees, and I'm so worried. Neville put his hand on hers and said, Don't worry, I have something that will help. He gave her a fire-invigorating draught for her Phoenix to drink, told her not to worry about the Thestrals because Hagrid would look after them. Then he took her by the hand and stood her up, walked her to the very end of the lake, right up to the edge of the grounds and into a shallow cave full of colourful crystals. He told her he found it whilst exploring for plants, and to put the baby demigeese in the cave, and they will find their shimmer by watching the beautiful crystals. Before she left, she hugged him, and he turned and left. The next time they met, he asked about the creatures. She explained that they were all better. Neville was pleased to have helped. He became so full of pleasure at this that he kissed Bronwyn and whispered in her ear that she was a good girl. Pinning her down on the forest floor, he kissed her again. Conceding to his playfulness, she allowed him to kiss and cuddle her till darkness enveloped them. Then he whispered in her ear that one day they would do much more than just kiss. But she had to be patient and wait until that chosen day would come. All she had to do was wonder when it would be. They walked hand in hand back to the castle, knowing that they would have fun playing games with each other, and one day have a deep connection. The Buggered by Emma James. During a walk back from dinner towards the dorms, I stopped to admire a statue of house elves. In the corner, there was a cupboard I hadn't noticed before. I opened it, and out jumped a Buggered. It was close to Halloween, and we had been watching horror movies in Muggle studies, which had scared me. The formless Buggered hesitated, having been locked up for a while, and then took the form of Dracula. I reached inside my pocket, but I couldn't find my wand. I must have left it in the Great Hall when practicing charms at dinner. I panicked about not having magic. I was too young to use spells without my wand. I ran, and Dracula followed. I had run the wrong way in my panic state and backed myself into a narrow corner I couldn't get out of. Dracula hovered over me, waiting. I didn't want my blood sucked, and no one was nearby to help. What was I going to do? I was more scared than I had ever been. I was going to be bitten, have my blood drained, and become Dracula's victim. I was only 12. I was too young for this. I had plans. I crouched down with my hands over my head, crying and shouting, No, 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 I don't want to be here. Why me? How can this happen to me? Wishing I had picked up my wand. Watching my life fade away and my future become non-existent. Then I looked. Dracula was still hovering in the same place. He wasn't doing anything to me yet. I remembered what had happened. In my panic, I completely forgot this was only a Buggered. I had allowed myself to succumb to panic, paranoia, and terror. I calmed myself by taking deep breaths, told myself that there was nothing to be scared of, and then I realised that was the answer. The Buggered couldn't hurt me, and all I needed to do was not be scared. Maybe if I showed it I wasn't scared, I wouldn't need magic. I kept saying in my mind, there is nothing scary here. I am in a corridor with just me and this being. There is nothing else here. I am safe. The corridor is in the entrance hall, which is big, safe, and if anyone is there, it won't be anyone bad. I've got this. The castle is safe, and I am safe. The Buggered touched against me. I almost panicked, but I restrained myself and instead walked calmly around the Buggered, looking it straight in the eye. It stood there, and I sensed its confusion. I turned and walked away towards the middle of the entrance hall. My plan was working. The Buggered turned to many forms, all familiar to me and my fears, but it was no use. I wasn't scared of anything anymore. The Buggered, vanquished, mixing itself up, floated back into its cupboard to save itself, and rushing forward, I slammed the door shut. I was proud of myself for facing my fears. As I went back into the great hall to retrieve my wand, I encountered Peeves playing with it. But when I told him my story, he immediately gave me my wand back and told me he was astoundedly proud of my maturity. I hopped off to bed, elated, and slept well for many nights after that, feeling safe under my own strength. The Ghost of Me by Emma James. I was walking in the woods and came upon an old, empty house. I was intrigued by the character of the house with peculiar shape and curious design. Opening the door to the house, it felt empty, dusty, but quiet and peaceful and very interesting. The first room was an immaculately laid out sitting room, but very dusty, with a door off to the right next to a hatch, presumably the kitchen, and a staircase starting in the middle of the room, then going off up to both sides, up to the left and straight to a small childlike door to the right. Excitedly, I opened the small door and got into the room. The room on the other side was in fact a den of some kind, with comfy furniture, books, and a large blackboard covered in calculations, which would make a lovely hideaway. The den was spoiled though with vials, beakers, and other scientific-looking equipment which had liquids in. As I watched, however, the glass beakers started to pour by themselves. The tubes filled with liquids which bubbled up and changed as they ran through tubing towards their destination. I turned to leave the room, but the door was locked, which was very strange. I noticed that the blackboard was empty. How did that happen? I was getting very scared now. I did not believe in ghosts, but things do not move themselves, and no one else was here. I looked all around, under blankets, behind chairs, but no one was found. Then the blackboard started filling with writing, telling me that I was in someone else's house and shouldn't be. That the only way to get out would be to drink the potion in the silver goblet and turn into a ghost, so that I could return to my dwelling and haunt it. Love from the ghost of the house. Obviously, I was terrified now and didn't want to turn into a ghost. I wanted to go home to my family, read my books, walk in the forest, and spend time with my loved ones. This was supposed to be an exciting adventure full of curiosity and happiness. With the blackboard still, I turned to the science experiment and noticed a silver goblet, but also a gold one. Having nothing to lose, I decided to drink the potion in the gold goblet instead. I disappeared immediately. Now I was so scared I cried, but I was curious that I could still walk. So I walked over to the door and right through it. I ran out of the house, and my body returned to my sight. I realised that luckily it was an invisibility potion. I had drunk the correct one, and knowing this, I went home, never to return again or venture somewhere that wasn't mine. Werewolf Publica by Emma James. An experiment had gone wrong, and a transfiguration spell accidentally turned some dogs into werewolves. so my class was asked to care for the puppies while a reversal spell was found. I was apprehensive about caring for a puppy as I can be a little wary of animals on occasion. I was also excited by their cuteness. In addition, I was intrigued by the fact that they were actually adorable little puppies. I decided that I would love to help. I couldn't wait to look after one because it would help me ease my anxiety around animals and be educational. When I saw one of the puppy's piercing, icy blue eyes, I immediately felt calm and chose him to take care of. His eyes reminded me of an Ice World series I had watched on TV. It was in Chinese language. For this reason, I decided to think of a name using words or parts of names that I liked from the series. I came up with the name Garlin, which I think is rather wolf-like, and it's a fitting, familiar type of name when taken from a word for brother. I went over to Garlin, who was playing with his friend. As I moved close, he saw me, then started to nip at my robes. My pup was hungry, and I had read that if werewolves bite human flesh, they may stay werewolves forever, not having a chance to return to natural form. I was worried if he bit me, it might have an effect on the transfiguration spell being reversed, so I quickly picked him up, snugly into my cloak, and ran down to Hagrid's. Hagrid gave me a bag full of small creatures as food. Carefully, I fed my pup some of the meaty treat. I tried not to let him get my fingers. When he was full, I stored the rest in my satchel for later. It was best we had them with us just in case. Hungry pup can be ferocious. It was very important to exercise such a young and ferocious creature, so we went for a long walk. Out in the street, Garlin happily scampered alongside me, entering the park. The autumn leaves crunched and twigs snapped under my feet. Yet, Garlin's paws crept silently on, moving unheard like the whisper of a breeze. Suddenly, though, he jumped into a large pile of mulch, covering himself in sticky mess. I gasped at the surprise, but laughed and giggled, watched him trying to shake off the debris. Further up the path and nearer to the river, I allowed him to swim in the shallows while I sat on a fallen tree to draw flowers, branches and leaf shapes in my sketchbook. 2 drinks of coffee later, after packing him up, I whistled for Garlin to follow. Children laughed on the playground. Garlin's ears pricked up, so I attached a lead until we passed. Horses cantered along the road, but Garlin growled, so I rubbed his neck and calmly told him not to worry. We wandered up a stony path, overhung with trees, making our way eventually out of the park as twilight began. Passing houses from street to street, our route took us into town. I wanted to visit my friend at his recording studio. Garlin clumsily took the first set of stairs, which older dogs would easily bound up. So I picked him up and carried the little tyke up the next 3 flights. In the kitchen, a bowl was found for water, which Garlin lapped up, thirsty from his walk. And as we ate sausages and drank cinnamon cappuccinos, he sniffed around inquisitively. That evening, we played guitars and drums and sang and laughed. When the moon rose high, Garlin started howling. We took him in the sound booth, hung a picture of the moon over the microphone, and watched him howl into it. It took a few attempts to get the perfect position. After we did, we made recordings of his howling, which we planned to add into songs. We also made videos of it, using the green screen for the planned werewolf film, Alu. Going back home for bedtime was quick as we disapparated. I had exercised Garlin a lot today, walking, singing and playing, and made him tired. I knew he would fall asleep easily after such a long day. He would also be less nippy from being tired. He did look less active, so I assumed this was true. I made him a bed in the kitchen with some old blankets. I put an old teddy in there too. Garlin snuggled up warm and calmed down well. But when I switched the light off and left, he howled. I had an idea, and enchanted the ceiling to look like the night sky. He loved it, and fell sound asleep till morning. Infestation by Emma James. There had been some busy and strange times at Hogwarts. Me and my friends were all looking forward to having a cosy night by the fire when, going to take a short walk after dinner, we spotted a large group of Inferi. Students were hastily heading towards dormitories, screaming that someone had let an infestation loose. Apparently they had come from a lake in the woods to take over the school. Looking back towards the Great Hall, it appeared the teachers were under a sleeping spell, and it just so happened that the headmistress was on an urgent errand. We ran down to the lake that the Inferi had come from to see what we could find. Searching around amidst the Inferi's prints, we found some remnants of a liquid which Paul managed to identify as Apologies potion, along with some strands of ginger hair. Was someone masquerading as a Weasley? From there, we headed back to the castle to search. On the way, we passed the Great Lake. Some merpeople had sensed us passing and signalled to us through means of a baby mermaid shell. We cast the bubblehead charm and ducked under the water. They gave us a magical trident that, when activated, would cast shock spells to any inferior around. Walking up towards Hagrid's hut, we tried to activate the trident to no avail. Hagrid said we needed to all hold it together and turn it thrice in hand to activate the spell, being mindful to keep all of us safe. Back at the castle gates, we huddled together and did as was told to us. The trident sent out shockwaves, knocking Inferi to the ground and allowing us to walk through. We headed to the dungeons. In the darkest corner of the castle, we saw a door that was new. Alohomora, Gloria said. But there was nothing there. Revelio, said Paul, and a cauldron appeared half full with Polyjuice potion. Creating a demixing spell, we discovered brown hairs in the potion, and that meant the ginger hairs had come from the person responsible for this catastrophe. Surely this was not a Weasley. Then I saw something in the corner of my eye. An empty bottle of Dr. Pepper. The perpetrator must have been Amy. She always has a bottle with her, and she has ginger hair. In the farthest corner of the room was a small chest. Opening it, we found Skylar inside, frightened, and her dark curls scrunched up in her tearful hands. Now we knew what to do. She was with us all along. She had been at the table with us creating her summons while pretending to be in the same state as everyone else. Rushing off up the stairs, we meet Amy masquerading as Skylar in the entrance hall. We surround her, shocking the inferior around us, and tell her we know who she is. She raises her wand, but tears fall from her face. She writes a message with her wand explaining she is under the Imperious Curse, and her hair was left in the forest after a struggle with the muggle-born Slytherin witch, Evanesca, who is hiding in the Room of Requirement. Now we have to change our plan. People are beginning to turn into Inferi. If we stop her now, we can reverse the effects. But will we be quick enough? The Bloody Baron comes up the dungeon steps, dragging Peeves behind him. He orders Peeves to distract the Inferi. He can do things with large groups that humans can't and confuse them, while we run upstairs to confront Evanesca. Opening the Room of Requirement to the correct type is easy. We just think of Evanesca. Once ready, we shoot defensive spells before we get through the door, knocking Evanesca to the ground. But she is fast, and still hold of her wand she strikes Paul with the Mobulus. He stops in his tracks. However, she has underestimated Gloria, who quickly sends Incarcerus flying at her. It half works and binds her legs. Angered, she tries to shoot spells at both of us but slips and misses as our disarming charms combine power to knock her wand away. We point ours at her and order her to stop the attack. She reluctantly stops the mind control, and downstairs, Madame Pomfrey wakes to administer healing potions to all victims who thankfully hadn't changed fully yet. The Inferi were trying to head back to the forest, but all of the awoken teachers worked together to conjure fire and destroy them all. After taking Evanesca to the dungeons to await the headmistress's return, Hagrid, my friends, and I went to the forest to check on the creatures that dwelled there. Gryffindor by Emma James. Gryffindor, just like my favourite colour, is red. We're not Hufflepuffs, though we like our food. Everyone knows lions are happiest when fed. We are brave, we are true. In the face of adversity, we shine out. We have seen it all, we know what it takes to put a smile on when we'd rather pout. Give a shout, give a roar for Gryffindor. The cavalry, the comrades, we are together. Come on our adventure, we will protect. Toughing it out, whatever the weather. Let's go and explore, let's complete our mission. We have no fear, most daring house of four. There's danger around every corner. We run in wand in hand. We'll take on the task and we'll delve into deep water. Give a shout, give a roar for Gryffindor. We are brave, we have nerve, we are daring and courageous. Give a shout, give a roar to Gryffindor.